In one of the last videos, I promised you that if you got over 1,000 likes in that video, I would present to you this game today. Well, not only did we reach 1,000 likes, you guys doubled it in a half to 2.4k likes outstanding. Here you have earned this beautiful game. Now, although last time Erobök, who played the game as the white pieces, dominated, he is famous for losing this game this time. He lost this game to none other than Alexander Alekhine, 4th world chess champion. Before diving into this game, it is important to establish a little context. At this time in 1938, Alexander Alekhine just regained his world chess championship title. That's right, I said regained. You see, Alexander Alekhine became world chess champion in 1927 to Jose Raul Capablanca. He maintained that title for 8 years until 1935. And in 1935, some rumored that he was a little too cocky in his match against Max Euwe and lost to Max Euwe, who was definitely not the favorite. And after 2 years in 1937, he regained his title. That was in the winter or spring before 1938, this tournament. In this tournament, he had won his 4 first rounds against Englishmen. And in the 5th round, he played a little too soft and lost against a really bad seed. Despite that upset, he was looking to roar back into his Game 6 and bring on the revenge pent up from his miserable last loss. This is the game. Alekhine has the white pieces and starts off with his queen pawn d4. His opponent responds the same with queen pawn d5. And after c4 proposing a queen's gambit, his opponent accepts the queen's gambit, which is rare to see nowadays because the queen's gambit is mostly refuted. After d takes c4, Alekhine seeks to regain this pawn, but with a lot of patience. He first plays knight f3, and after knight f6, he goes e3, now attacking the pawn on c4 and looking to regain the material. e6 for his opponent means Burke is giving back the pawn on c4, and Alekhine takes it at once. c5 is played to then attack the center, and Alekhine just castles quickly. Knight c6, which is not seen as the most accurate move. Usually a6 here is a good shot to threaten b5 and attack the bishop on tempo, to then go bishop d7 and develop the bishop along this long diagonal. And if white blocks this with a4, well then they've given themselves a very big hole on b4, and now knight c6 is pertinent to control said square. After knight c6, Alekhine proceeded with development of queen e2. Queen e2 is a very crucial move in this game, although it doesn't appear like much, but it really clears this d1 square for an eventual rook d1 to go on this open file. You will see this theme repeatedly throughout the game. So a6 is played, meaning that b5 is in the works. b5 with the development of this light-squared bishop. Alekhine develops with knight c3, and after b5 attacking the bishop, gaining tempo, Alekhine just reclines his bishop to b3. And now starts a little tizzle. b4 is played here. The move of too much. Here black should have played something like bishop b7, sticking to their plan and getting that bishop on the good side of the board. Instead, b4 is a quite new move, and lets for something that is on the unknown. If you're a chess player and you go into the wilderness like this, you better know your stuff, because if it turns sour, it might turn against you. Alekhine decides to refute b4 attacking a knight with this really creative d5. I really like this move. Why? Because it forces things without making a big fuss. Here, if you were to take this knight, and I take yours, and then I'm attacking your pawn, so you're inclined to take mine, now I develop my bishop and have a raise of bishops along these diagonals, keeping this pawn and being a pawn up for now. So this line is not that favorable. So that means you don't take this knight. Okay, as the black pieces now, you have to assess if you're taking this pawn or moving this knight, because my pawn is attacking yours. If black chooses e takes d5, white just has knight takes d5, getting out of that attacked squared and sacrificing this knight, but not for long. If you take the knight and accept the sacrifice, I have our themed rook d1 from a couple moves ago, attacking this knight a second time. And if you defend this knight with a minor piece, it's the only way. Here I have at least e4 to attack this knight a third time and regaining the piece with a very strong pawn in the center. This is also not desirable for black. So what is to be done? Black moved their knight to a5 out of the attacked square and attacking this bishop to try to win the bishop pair. Alekhine does not want to give his bishop pair and plays bishop a4 check on the king. This incites a small response by black. Either you have to block with the bishop or block with the knight. I don't like knight blocks because of d takes, which forces f takes, and then it looks like knight e5 is super strong, attacking this knight and drilling in an absolute pin. And Burke here plays bishop d7, the only non-losing move in this position. Alekhine follows up with d takes e6, another very interesting move. It has many dimensions, it's so fascinating. If you take the bishop here on a4, I have the intermediate move e takes f7 check on the king, forcing the king to move, and then I take back the bishop with the pawn up and your king in the center, looking ridiculous. So that would never work out. Okay, so what else can you do? You can take my knight, but now my pawn is high enough to do e takes d7 and take back the piece, inflicting a lot of damage on you. If you take back with your knight, I have rook d1, not even caring about this pawn on c3, and just straight up attacking absolute pin style this knight on d7 with knight e5 coming in. It's over. So black, once again, does the only move and plays f takes e6. I have to give credit to the black pieces. They're defending pretty well given the circumstances here. The knight is still hanging though on c3. That's kind of fascinating. It's been 2 moves. And it's about to be 3 moves. Here Alekhine goes rook d1. The first brilliant move of 3 in this game. Rook d1 sacrifices a knight out of midair on move 13. That is not usual in grandmaster top level play. Additionally, this sacrifice is so obscure as to why the benefit is reaped by the white pieces. Usually you have compensation in terms of space, in terms of forcing the opponent king to be unsafe, or you win compensation in material. There are certain advantages you get when sacrificing. Maybe a mating net, but no. Here after rook d1, purely an intuitive sacrifice, which was new at the time, Alekhine goes up from his chair and goes to seek out people in the room, kind of cocky, and he goes to speak to Miguel Najdorf. Miguel Najdorf is very, very famous and a chess legend. He also has a very famous chess opening in the Sicilian defense named after him. He goes to Miguel Najdorf after looking over the board while Eero is focusing on his game and says to Najdorf, "What do you think of that sacrifice?" And just the fact that Najdorf reported that exact same phrase years ago shows how significant this moment is in chess history. I will tell you after what Najdorf responded after this game, but for now let's concentrate on the game. After rook d1, his opponent played the best move here. B takes c3, taking the knight and accepting the sacrifice. It's the only non-losing move again. And so now Alekhine goes as scheduled. He proceeds here, again ignoring this pawn, and shows us his true colors of talent. Rook takes d7, merely taking off a defensive piece from the board and putting in a super weak piece, replacing it. The knight is forced to take this. The queen cannot move out, we're threatening discovered checks on the king here. So you are forced to take this, a second brilliant move in the game. Look at the benefits we have. We have 2 developed pieces and a queen. Here after knight takes d7, Alekhine pursued with knight e5, drilling on this pin. This is called an absolute pin in chess, when not only you have pinned a piece to a king or a major piece, but also are putting pressure on that piece. And here knight e5 is also beautiful because you're opening up the queen to potential h5 threats onto this king. Very nice. Though we can observe that white is not just going to win off of this. We have serious problems in our camp of underdevelopment. And so here, after knight e5, this does threaten this knight in a very serious way, and black plays what seems to be the only defense, rook a7. There is also another line, bishop d6, to defend this, because if knight takes, you have bishop takes h2, king takes, queen h4 check, king g1, and then you take the bishop here. Don't ask, I looked at the engine for this, okay? I'm not coming up with this on my own. But bishop d6 is a valid defense, and here white needs to go into the line with knight takes d7, or play queen h5. g6, knight takes, h takes, queen takes, bishop f8, and this is Alekhine's line. He reported this after the game, and he said that with e4 and 2 pawns for the piece, and with a lot of pressure coming in for the white pieces. But that's not what was played, so let's look at rook a7, and let's get down to the meat. Rook a7 defense. So how, as the white pieces, are you going to build up an attack now? Queen h5 is a valid option, but after g6, knight takes, h takes, and queen takes, it looks like black can recover with king f7, and it looks like white's attack is completely died down and no pieces are communicating with each other, and black literally has compensation, and it looks like they have a more somehow ferocious position. Somehow. But it's really duly to those weak pieces on the queen side. So here, after rook a7, being down a rook, might I remind you, Alekhine plays b takes c3, which is a miss, but it's like the third best move. So let's be honest and move on from this. B takes c3 is such a patient move. You are just taking out the small insect from your house and taking the time to prepare your bishop from getting out. Because otherwise, this will pose annoyances if c takes b2 one day, deflecting your bishop off the trajectory it wants to get on. Realize how white are taking this and are still instilling as much pressure on this knight in the most calm way. I just have to say calm, it's so calm, it's crazy. So here his opponent replies with king e7. Because look at the black camp. They have this knight that is absolutely frozen. It cannot move. Knight c4, knight c6, both lose the knight. Knight b7 gives the c6 square and gives knight c6, or even, the rook doesn't defend the knight anymore, knight takes d7. The black pieces are deemed useless, or at least half of them are. We can say that for the rook here, we can say that for the underdeveloped bishop, and we can say that for the knight on a5. Not to mention this absolutely pinned knight on d7, and this rook that's absolutely useless. The rook is so useless, it cannot even move laterally. If you go rook c7, this gives the vital pawn on a6. And now we attack e6 and a5. We are talking about 5, maybe 6, including the queen, petrified pieces. Petrified. The black pieces were so exhausted by the pressure instilled by 2 minor pieces that they have forced themselves to play a king move to get out of the pin and threaten this knight. Alekhine, if we have read the dictionary so far of this game, continues his circus of brilliance and goes with e4. Might I remind you, king e7 gets out of the pin and attacks this knight. It's like a move that's supposed to accelerate the black pieces. Instead, e4 just laughs at the regressiveness of the black pieces. The absolute ridiculousness of this king move that has opened up a weak diagonal. And now we've opened up a diagonal that can access that weak diagonal. And so here on e4, if you decide to indulge in this knight on e5, we have the incredible bishop g5, which is a simple skewer, but more than that, after king f7, which is forced, or king d6, we would just take a full queen. So e4, the third brilliant move of the game, and here, Burke plays knight f6. And now Alekhine finally develops his attack, and let me remind you that black still hasn't progressed in their position. They've had 4 moves to do something without success, and yet Alekhine has come from an underdeveloped attack. Underdeveloped attack. That's a paradox. Underdeveloped attack to now a thriving militia with a bishop axed against this knight, king, and queen, a bishop razoring through the black pieces' light squares, a now opened first rank for a rook to properly emerge on a devastating open d file. A queen so central, it can slit its dagger across both sides of the board, and a knight. Here black played queen c7, just getting out of this open d file because you're anticipating rook d1 next, and you can't do much. And here actually, Alekhine misses the only win he has presented to himself in the game. The rest of the moves he finds. But here he could have actually been clinical with queen h5. Okay, it's hard to find. Let's be honest. You're sacking another piece and going off of this pin on this knight to allocate, to indulge in this h5 square and threaten mate in a few moves. So he misses this, but I don't blame him because the next move he plays here is still very nice. Bishop f4. And here you're threatening knight g6 check, discovery on this queen to win it on c7, and so it engages the black pieces to do another defensive or anticipatory move. Here queen b6 is played. You have to move out of the defense. Though, when preparing this game 30 minutes before I started recording this, there came a time where I had to look at variations to sort out what was interesting to show you. Little did I know there was a variation that I had before missed. I knew about this game, but I had missed this variation before. And it's only by looking through an article that I found this insane variation. I cannot say this more in this video. This variation is better than the game, and Alekhine was sad that this wasn't played because he had calculated this and reported it to the news right after the game was played. This was the variation. Queen b7 is what Alekhine would have hoped his opponent would have played. And let's look at it. He said he saw this variation, queen e3. Now queen e3 just threatens this pawn on c5 with, okay, a mating attack, but it's kind of defendable. If knight takes e4, seemingly defending c5, he reports that bishop g5 is absolutely devastating. And it is. On king d6, which is the only king move here, rook d1, and it's kind of a GG's. King c7, and now you have just rook d7, and you're going to win the queen. Okay, and if you take the bishop, well then I can just take, and it's going to be mate imminently. King d6 is also it's also a move. Knight f7, brilliant move. Of course, another brilliant move. Queen takes, and now rook d1. After king c7, we have queen d8 matching up with the newly placed rook on d1, king b7, and then rook b1 with checkmate. So this doesn't work to defend on c5. Okay, so what if king d8? The king just fleeing. And this is the variation that's spectacular. I jumped out of my chair. Genuinely jumped out of my chair, jumped on my bed. That is right there. Crazy. He reports queen d3 check. Okay? Queen d3 check, king c8, rook b1. Okay? Just a subtle rook move attacking the queen. The queen, upon observation, doesn't have many squares. Alekhine just gives one line, and I want to show you that one line. He gives queen takes e4. And in this position, Alekhine calculated. I can even play this. He calculated this and wanted to play this. The only winning move for the white pieces in the most incredible fashion. Knight f7. No! Knight e7 is so out of this world and into outer space, so counterintuitive, that you are bringing your knight off of the defense of your queen to f7 to literally ask the black pieces politely to take your queen, while also hanging your knight. So why does this work? If you take the queen, the knight going to f7 unveiled for this bishop to open up on a diagonal, right? We just needed a diagonal. Why? Because rook b8 is checkmate. And okay, if you don't take my queen and you take this knight, I simply have rook b8 checkmate as well, because now this queen takes up d8. So the knight move, knight f7, is just to take up d8 by any move you can and open up this bishop for this rook to also communicate. So two things it does in one move, and it sacrifices three pieces at once. So anyways, going back to the game, Burke played queen b6. Alekhine brings his final piece in the attack, rook d1. And this really takes up the d file. That's the only, it's like really the D file, and maybe D7 in the future. Who knows? I do. G6 is played. Well, okay, rook D1 I can go a little bit more in depth. You're threatening bishop G5 essentially to pin the knight and queen H5. And because the rook is on D1, you're taking up all the escape square for the king, and you're essentially creating a mating net and just like going on to F7 or E8 with checkmate with your queen. So, rook D1, G6 is played because the black pieces have absolutely nothing. Their pieces are so passive and gotta come up with something. So G6 is played. Here, black aims to develop their bishop to defend. So on G6, Alekhine, still the most patient man in the world, plays bishop G5, going on this newly weak pin for the second time of the game on this square, and now kind of forces a reply bishop G7, which was played. Alekhine now pursues with knight D7. Knight D7 is such an odd move. I feel like you would never see this over hundreds of games, because who puts a knight on D7, and how can a knight emerge on the D7 square in the black territory? First of all, this knight is pinned on F6, so it cannot take our knight. Our knight is attacking the queen, but it's not doing that much else. It's doing something a little bit more sneaky. This is a clearance move. You are clearing the E5 square for your E4 pawn to go to E5 and pin this knight to win a piece. So essentially, you're attacking this queen and threatening E5. That's what this combination is. Kind of simple when you think about it. Black wanted no part in this and sacked the exchange back. Here, take the exchange, don't talk to me ever again, and let this be an equal game, please. That is the message that rook takes D7 gives. Rook takes D7 is responded with rook takes D7. You best believe it. This knight is still pinned, and we're not leaving until we get what we want. Rook takes D7 check, forces king F8. If king goes to E8, this is going into a pin basically, and a discovered attack. Not a pin, a discovered attack, sorry. And we go rook B7 check, and we win the queen here. So check forces king F8. Okay. Alekhine goes with just like such a simple, sweet kiss. You're just kissing your opponent. Bishop takes F6. Which forces bishop takes F6. And now we're seeing that this file is kind of weak, right? He doesn't even go for queen F3. Queen F3 is not the winning move. This is the only winning move here, E5. Burke must have had enough because Guy resigned here. He resigned. E5 is a resignable offense. And let me tell you why. We are about to win back the piece that we're down because material has been exchanged, and we're only a piece down now instead of a rook. So we're about to win back this bishop. Why? This bishop is absolutely petrified. It's frozen in time. You cannot move this bishop. If you move this bishop on G5 or G7, the same outcome is given, so I'll just show one line. If bishop G7, we have queen F3. Check on this king, king E8 or G8, and queen F7 checkmate anyways. You go here, it's checkmate. So the bishop can't go there. If the bishop goes to E7 and you think you're a bit smarter than I thought you were, queen F3 and king here, and now I don't have checkmate on F7, well then I have rook D3 with the bishop coming in with check, and look at how this is a beautiful checkmating mating net. Checkmating mating net, yeah. It's checkmate if black doesn't block. Knight C6 played and bishop takes C6. Here, black is forced to give up the queen, otherwise it's checkmate. It's a beautiful mating net, and this is, I mean, a queen for a bishop, completely winning, let's say. So okay, you can't move your bishop, but that doesn't mean you don't have check. Queen B1 check, right? Usually a good resource for an opponent that is desperate. And here on queen B1 check, it is a classic case of call the ambulance, but not for me. Here white has rook D1, just bringing the rook back and inflicting virtually a double attack. The queen would have to move, let's say queen B7, and upon winning back this bishop, here it is equal, but white is completely winning due to the lack of safety of this king on F8. It's completely over. Also, this knight is out of play, and also this rook is not played in a century. It has not ever been played. It's so sad. It's unfulfilled potential. But contrastly, look at these pieces. Insane. just waiting to eat. To give you an example here, an idea of how bad this is here, how black are suffering, the engine gives king f7 as black's number one move. King f7 openly gives rook d7, forking the king and queen. Like how's that the best move? But before you go, let me just finish the anecdote that I started in the middle of this game. You remember on move 14, when Alekhine went off his table after sacrificing his rook, went to chess legend Miguel Najdorf and said, "What do you think of that rook sacrifice?" Well, years later, or 1 year later, sorry, in 1939, the Olympiad of 1939 in Argentina, this was a very important Olympiad in Argentina for Miguel Najdorf because he ended up staying in Argentina because of World War II breaking out and he was Jewish. But in this tournament, he goes to Alekhine, approaches him, and says to Alekhine, "You remember that time that you went up to me in 1939 and asked me what I thought about that rook sacrifice? And I responded to you that it was brilliant? Well, I had no idea what you were talking about. I simply could not calculate that far." Alekhine smirks, looks at him, and says, "Me too. I sacrificed that rook purely on intuition." Thank you so much for watching, and if we get 5K likes on this video, I promise I will get you a better game than this. I always strive to get my content better, so if you have any comments, any suggestions, I would be open to receive them in chat. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.